Okay, so the last time that I had this fender off, I was swapping out the brake light assembly, and I went through and showed how you can, what all needed to be disconnected, what all needed to be unscrewed, unbolted, everything like that, how to remove the rear fender, just from the basics, step by step that way. Thankfully with this particular model, this is a 2018 Shadow Aero. This is an ABS model. So the wiring placement might be a little bit different as to where it actually connects to the main wire harness than it does on the standard versions. So I was swapping out this brake light assembly mainly because the wiring cover had been more or less run down by the rear tire up underneath the fender here. So it was actually exposing wires, and I just, it wasn't to the point, it was kind of past the point where I could just patch it up with like a heat shrink wrap or something like that to keep it protected. So whenever I did take this off, then I swapped this out, left this whole portion here intact, and did apply an additional abrasion heat shrink protection coating over the brake light wire where it had rubbed through before. And just taking a look at it a couple of seconds ago, it looks like it is held. So no issues there. We're not going to be taking any of the brake light out or anything like that. This video is completely different. We will be dealing with where the wires actually come out, because I'd really like to be able to drill as few holes into this thing as necessary, to be able to run the additional wires, because I don't want to do what I've seen typically done, where it's like they drill two separate holes for the turn signal wiring on either side of the fender, and I really don't want to have to do that unless it's absolutely necessary. Depending on how this is on the opposite side, I may have to, but I'm also looking at possibly having to drill through some metal there. Let's just take a quick look at that. Okay, so what it looks like, what I want to be able to do is run the two turn signal wires from here up along this tube structure right here. It looks like a rebar, honestly, up to this bracket right here. This hole looks like it might be able to fit the two connectors. What I may end up having to do is just run the wires before reconnecting them, because I do have two turn signal wires. I got a new stock set of turn signals that I'm going to use because the other ones kind of got scratched up with the saddlebags that I did have on previously. And so I'm going to be using the wiring from the old ones to run back to the main connection point toward the battery on the bike. Whereas I'm going to be using the new ones and running the wires out this way. So we've got quite a bit of clearance at the back because of the kind of swoop that this fender has. But at the same time, it's going to be a tight fit for some of these things. I know back behind here, whenever I was swapping out the brake light, there was kind of like a rubber grommet that I guess was to kind of prevent moisture from getting in or anything like that. I may end up having to remove that just to be able to get the wires to slip through, but we'll just have to see whenever we get into that. The first thing that I am going to do though is fix the mount the turn signals, run the wiring through the license plate base box there on the other side of this, and then once I get those fixed, then I'll be seeing where the wires can run. And I figured probably just kind of running them up along here using zip ties, because they're going to have enough clearance from the wheel being tucked up back behind here, and there is a space underneath there to be able to do that. which will not be a problem. This is what I'm concerned about right there, because that's running through the metal. There does look like there's a little bit of space that could be moved out of the way, and I just need enough to be able to slide the wires through. If I can't do the connections without, or if I can't run the wires with the connections attached, then what I may end up just doing, it's probably be the best way of doing it actually, is just running the wires that are cut up through here to where they're not having to have that extra room for the connectors. The only problem is in the future, they might end up having to be cut just to be able to fit through there. But I'll test it with the wires that I do have before installing all this stuff and kind of see what I'm working with that way. So before working on anything with the Fender, I'm going to go ahead and remove the turn signals from the side brackets, since I'm going to have that off anyway. And what I am doing is just kind of prying up some of these little metal brackets here. Running these through here, there should be enough room to be able to run 2 of these cables down through there, and then possibly even just zip tie and kind of piggyback. We just need to make sure that we don't, so let's see which one. This side, I think, no, that's the left side. So this is the one that we're actually we're not going to have anything running along this side anyway. So, but since these are both mirrored on each side, then what we can do is just run them both along the same side and then zip tie, since there's only one inline connector for these, is just, man, that thing is tight. Rusted through or not, sheesh. No, it's just on there real tight. Goodness. Okay. So we've got the left one out. That is the one that we're going to be cutting the wire and making up for the extra slack that we'll need to go from under the fender, or actually just outside of the fender. And then I need to do something about that, whether a wrapper, I don't know. So that taken off, we got the left one done, and this bracket could probably just be set over by the bike with the other stuff. I might clean it up a little bit too, and then I'll end up doing something for that as well. I tried looking online to see if they had like any kind of caps for these type of things, but in most cases it just seemed like, because of the size of the bags, and they have to fit like on the last 2 brackets here, or last 2 bolts here, instead of the front 2 where I had been mounting my saddlebags. This will probably end up being covered up anyway, so I may not even have to do anything for that. But that is removing the turn signal from there, and we'll move on to the right one, and that is the one that we're actually going to be paying close attention to. One of the things too I kind of do whenever I'm going through these is taking photos, just so whenever you go back and reassemble everything, you know where everything is supposed to go, how it's supposed to fit together, and make sure that nothing is put out of place whenever it's all reinstalled. So we'll move on to the right one, and then we'll bring the fender back up here, and then we'll get to work on that. So here is our right turn signal that we're going to be removing now, and we'll do the same thing with prying these up and away. There we go. Don't know why those things are so tight in there. It's like, okay, and then just pull this wire through. Okay, so as you can see here, these wires can actually fit through here. They can fit through here, but I think what I'm going to do is actually drill this out a little bit more. I've got a step drill bit. So for those of you who have not used these before or have seen these are called step drill bits. I've used this on other projects before. Related to this bike, actually, I used one of these to be able to drill out a larger opening on the saddlebag spacers for my Viking saddlebags, this is very helpful for especially something like this, because with something like this, with as thin as this wall is, I mean it's about the width of what one of those I would say graduation steps are, or graduated steps are. So I can drill out very slowly to make this opening a little bit larger without actually going into the frame. That's kind of what I was originally expecting I would have to do. Whenever I was looking at this project in the first place, was using one of these to be able to do that, and so I think that's going to work. I was able to fit all of these through here. Now it may feed a little bit differently whenever it actually gets into trying to fit it back into those positions inside of the bracket, because you know, previously the bracket was completely separate and apart from this, so it may just be run loosely, just like the brake line is, because the brake line's not clipped into anything either. So we just may find the empty spaces within that bracket and just kind of feed it in through that way, or back behind where like the sissy bar bracket is and things like that. But we'll know better whenever we actually get to that point of it. What we're going to do now is we're going to unbolt this from the back so that we can slide it out, unplug this brake light wiring from this housing, and then start working on installing our turn signals and our mounts and stuff like that. Now, one thing that I will say, universal turn signal mounting brackets. One of the things that I love reading in people's comments on those particular items is, it worked great after I did all this modification to it. So my thinking is, why in the world does it work that great if you have to do your own modification to it anyway? So not only that, I've never really been that big of a fan of the look of these universal mounting brackets, because they're just kind of, well, here, let me get it real quick. This is the universal bracket. Now, at first sight, when we get it out of the box, it looks like it's already got pre-drilled holes here that would work to be able to feed the wire through and possibly either screw in the turn signal bolted in that way. It also appears like it would have the bolts in line, but even looking at that now, those are not even in line with where they should be. They're slightly outside, so there's another modification that would have to be made. Whenever you actually compare this to one of the OEM turn signals, you got a spot for the wire to be able to run through and for that notch to be able to have some sort of a space to be able to lock into, but you still got to drill an additional hole. It's like, why didn't you even bother going that far, or just not including any holes at all, whether here or here, and just provide, templates to be able to have those holes drilled by the person who is actually installing it. It just doesn't make any sense. So the universal bracket is not really as universal as it seems to be. So since most of the reviews that I've seen on these things are where people are either saying that, it worked beautifully with slight modification, or on the other hand, I just ditched it altogether and just fabricated my own, that was the route that I decided to take. So, this wonderful age of technology, and actually being in the 3D design business myself, I just went ahead and decided to go ahead and model and print and create my own bracket that would fit with the look and style of the bike, would be the right size and dimensions that I needed for it to be able to install cleanly, neatly, and be what I needed it to be able to mount onto the base housing here. So I went ahead and did that. This is actually a solid, mostly solid, I would say probably 90% solid piece of ASA plastic that is both UV and water resistant, waterproof. Water does not have any kind of effect on this, so the moisture is not going to be any kind of problem, and unless it gets to a 500 degree day, which I don't think it's going to do that anytime soon, then this should hold up very well. I've also got it wrapped in a heat shrink material to provide a little bit of added protection. Even though this is not really bearing any weight once it's mounted, because this will be screwed in on the back side with a washer that I also cut out as well, to be able to provide a little bit extra support on the inside of the housing itself. Now there is a metal structure, kind of a frame on the inside of this, and I think that's the only place that you can actually drill any kind of holes in this thing. So I'll just be drilling like 1, 2, 3 across from each other, in order to be able to feed the line through, to be able to feed the bolt through. And then this is a little kind of a knob arm here to be able to prevent it from rotating or anything like that if the screw ever does come loose, which hopefully it shouldn't. If it does, I'll be making another video. So what we're going to do first is we're going to take this off, and then we're going to get in and start feeding the wires through how best we can after we have drilled the holes and installed the turn signals themselves. I'm going to be keeping the bag on this just to be able to make sure that this thing, I almost thought I had a scratch there for a moment, just to be able to make sure that this doesn't have any scratches or anything like that during the installation process. And then we'll be good to go. Actually, I might even just take this all off until it is installed, and then we should be good that way. So let's get to it. Okay, so what I've done here is I have taken off the license plate bracket. It'll go just under the light, under the thing there. And the main reason why I'm doing this is because I need to remove this metal piece out of here to be able to drill the necessary holes, and also to be able to kind of have an idea of how much room I'm working with to be able to position the new turn signal brackets. So I've got kind of like a little cutout template thing here that I plan to place on the inside of this to kind of see where that needs to be placed to drill through, so that I am not interfering with any connections or running into any bolts or anything like that. That's going to be a problem that way. So I'm just going to unscrew these here, and once I've got these off, and I also need to remove the helmet lock that was on the back of the license plate thing too, and kind of readjust that. Might actually clean up some of these pieces too while I'm at it. So we got that, and then we got another bolt down here, third one, that keeps that metal frame bolted inside the housing. And this is also another reason why I decided to go with a longer bolt for the mount as well, probably longer than what would have been necessary otherwise. Let's see. Yeah, that's all. Be very careful because this is a metal piece coming out of a plastic one. I'm wondering if it's got like some sort of adhesive or something. And that is why I've got a shop manual. So we will consult the almighty shop manual to see if there's something in there that I can't actually just see from visual inspection. So I don't want to mess anything up or break that. I do have an extra one of these, worst case scenario. So I'll take a look at that and see what I'm dealing with, and then it might just be kind of stuck in there, much like the bolts on the turn signals were. Actually, it feels like it might be an adhesive piece or something, but okay. So after looking into this further, you may or may not be able to see down into the back of this. There are two bolts at the very top of this that are screwed into the back of the actual light fixture there, that shines down on the license plate. And honestly, I have no idea how in the world you would get up inside of there with as close as it is. You'd almost have to have a flexible socket wrench head, but even then, I don't really see how you'd be able to do that. So that plate is actually pressing against this metal one, and it's a stay, so it keeps it kind of wedged in there. Now, I don't know how much flexibility it actually has. I tried pulling on this thing slowly but kind of forcefully, and it still would not budge. So I kind of had to resort to just kind of eyeballing it as best I could and as accurately as I could to be able to kind of tape off what the safe sections are. So currently what we're actually looking at is a safe section within this area here, so that it doesn't come into this metal piece right here. So we've got kind of like a, and typically, you know, you could just drill one hole and not have to worry about necessarily being exact on the placement of it, as long as it was in that general area. Just running your wire through. If you are just using like one of the universal bracket things modified, but for this, I'd make sure that it was it would fit within the perimeter allowed for not only a hole to be able to put the wire in through, and it doesn't have to be this size. Depending on how close I am to that metal bracket, I may end up just doing one 8mm hole here, another 8 here, and then a 6 here for the bolt that would end up needing to go through that. So I'm doing this on the right side first, and that's kind of where this will be sitting whenever it's finally installed. So we got enough clearance at the front and at the back, and then just kind of cleaning it up a little bit, probably with a Dremel tool on low, just to kind of sand down some of those edges whenever I get these holes drilled out. So this is about as far as I can really go with the tools and understanding of how to get those things out. You can't get to them through the back of here because these two only remove the cap that is over the brake light bulb itself. So it's kind of at the point of no return, and measured 20 times, and hopefully we'll only be drilling once. So I'm going to do it on the right side, kind of see how that works, and then I'm going to go over and do the similar thing on the left. I might be able to drop a pin, or like an ink pen or something like that, through and get these dots lined up even better on the opposite side, or at least the one for the 6mm bolt, and maybe the 8M or M8 on the other side as well, just for that notch, because honestly the cord itself just needs an 8mm hole to be able to fit through with the coupler as well. So let's go ahead and drill those out and see where we are. Okay, I've got one more hole to drill on this side. This one's already been drilled out and fitted successfully, so that's working very well. I ended up doing a kind of a reverse template from the opposing side using masking tape, just to kind of get a general idea of where the hole needed to go for this. And of course, once again, if you're just drilling a hole for a single wire to run through, if you're using one of the universal brackets, then you know that it will not be this complicated. Part of the reason why this is complicated is because I'm trying to fit it in through a lot of the obstacles that I've got to work around inside this, but so far it seems to be working pretty well. And once I've got this one hole done, then I can work on trying to get the new turn signals mounted to the bracket, get the license plate reinstalled, because once we've got that, then I can start working on how to run the wires through the back of the fender, and then I'll move on to actually splicing the wires to see how much length we need to connect it to the main wiring harness on the bike itself. So this is almost done, and once I get these screwed in and everything, then we'll have the wires running both out of this back section here and then into the bike. So even with this wire, it's kind of tucked up in here a little bit, so we'll just need to have a little bit extra slack. We may end up using the entire wire lengths of both of them just to have a little extra slack on the front end as well. We'll just have to see once we get this mounted and the wires run that way, and then we're ready to apply the extensions for the additional length that we need to connect to the wiring harness. So get this drilled out, get these installed, and then we'll move on to the next part. Okay, now that is a little bit thinner there, but there wasn't a lot of space to be able to go forward in all of that. There. Now I will be putting, I do have a washer that I specifically cut out for this to be able to use, so that will be kind of giving it a little bit of extra reinforcement on the back, though I don't know. Yeah, that should cover within that area, I think. It may be the left, yeah. So we're gonna get these mounted and see what we've got, and then go from there and run on the wires. Okay, so we have successfully drilled out the holes on either side. This mount here is still kind of a little rough in there. Hold out for a moment. Okay. What we're going to do next, I've got 2 bolts that are going to go in this thing. And I've also got washers. These are 6M by 30 that I've got just to kind of, because I knew that there was a metal bracket on the inside of here, so this is actually going to go up against the inside of this so that all the weight is not on this plastic wall itself. It might be able to support it, maybe not, because the lights are not that heavy, but I'm just wondering about any kind of like bouncing or jarring around riding on the road or anything like that. So I've got these that are going to actually help to brace it against this metal piece in here. So we're just going to go ahead and slide this in and get that in place. Move it around some as need be. And that's good. I don't know if you can actually see inside there or not. Down there. And that, if that little notch comes any further past the metal piece there, then we'll just adjust that on that side. Now, this is a very tight area to be able to get this in. Now, even if you didn't have like additional brackets like what I've got here, you would still need to you would still have to drill 3 separate holes, even if you were just going to mount it directly to this piece here. So even with that being the case, you'd still have to be able to have enough room to be able to screw these in or bolt the lights down to be able to do that. So now we're ready to mount our lights, and I've got a very small kind of a socket, not a socket, but a bit ratchet wrench here, because there's honestly very little space. It would take me forever if I were to try to manually do it with an Allen wrench like this. So if you've got like a 90-degree angle drill attachment or anything like that, that would be a lot faster than just trying to do this manually with a Allen wrench. So I'm gonna get our turn signal here that is for the right side, which is the blue. I'm just gonna keep that in there until we got the wire fed through. So this is, yes, that's the left side. We need the right side here, so this is the right side. It's good. Now, before we take that out, I'm going to feed this through. I may actually put a, well, I can't actually put a nut on the end of that thing to prevent it from sliding around. Of course, this there is a little bit, so we'll just go ahead and feed this through. Put that over there. Get these wires fed through, like so. I want to be careful. These wires have always felt kind of twisted, even just in their protective wrapping itself. So I would just be careful. Okay, so we finally got both of these two mounted, and one of the things that I did do as a slight adjustment, because I kind of debated doing this before, but it kind of seemed maybe a little too much reinforcement at the time. So while installing this one of these little plastic, and I mean it's solid, but still it was twisted whenever I was putting it on, so that ended up breaking off. So what I ended up doing was taking just kind of like a I think it's a socket head bolt, and drilling that out and then just putting one of those in there. So now this is solid. This is not going to have any kind of issues. I don't know if you can see inside there with all of these wires, but that is solid. It's got a washer that is putting most of the tension on this metal bracket here, and it's all very solid. It looks like it's in line, good to go. So now we'll just install the license plate nuts and bolts back together, and then we're going to move on to working on feeding these lines through the back of the fender where the taillight connector comes through, and then we'll work on kind of sorting out where the lines, we're going to feed the lines up. If we're looking at the back of the bike, we're going to feed the lines up the right side of the fender where the brake line or the brake light wire comes out. And I think that we should be able to just use the existing hole. If it is too tight getting through there, or it feels like it might need a little bit more space to maneuver, we want it to be secure, we want it to be tight, so we might just leave it at that, and that will work to our favor that way. And then once we get that done, then we'll move on to determining how long. We're going to put the fender back on the bike just temporarily and determine how long of a wire extension we need to run from this, which would be, these will come out on the side of the rear fender, no problem, without any kind of splicing beforehand. And we'll also have some of these like tucked back in here too, just to kind of give a little extra space. This wire is actually tucked back in here too whenever it's connected. So once we get all of that put into place, I could probably just go ahead and start screwing this back together. Okay, so we've got our lights finished and wired here. We've got the bracket done here. It was just slightly too tight to be able to fit all three of the wires in here. So I ended up having to remove the rubber grommet, which, I mean, this is just, you know, an added precaution for any kind of like moisture to get in here. But at the same time, at the very bottom of the taillight base, we've got these two notches. Sorry, that's a metal chair. We've got these two notches here that will allow any kind of water that is thrown up in here normally to be able to seep out. So, you know, all the wires up in here are sealed. There's not going to be any problem with any moisture getting where it's not supposed to be. So in order to be able to make additional room for the other two wires to go through here, then I ended up slightly enlarging this just a little bit. Because there's a metal plate back behind here, I wasn't able to use one of the step bits, but I did use a 1/2 inch drill bit to just kind of broaden this a little bit. It still looks, you know, presentable, pretty good. It just doesn't have the bevel edge on it, to just give that little extra room to be able to feed these wires through. So we're going to go ahead and install those and then work on running the wires up. I've got this elevated now because we've got the additional protrusions on the side of this. So I'm going to go ahead and start setting this up to where you can feed the lines through. Go ahead and connect this back, and then just kind of stuff in the wires so that we can have enough space to be able to maneuver them around and move them as necessary while we feed them up along the side of this until we get to the brake line output right here, which I might drill that out just a little bit more just to make it a little bit more comfortable for those to fit through. Since this was really, I think in millimeters, it's like 12 millimeters to make it more comfortable, whereas this right now is about at 10 or 11, something like that. So they can fit through this, but it is really snug. So with these, there's still a little bit of space to be able to do, but I've only got the largest drill bit that I've got is 1/2 inch, so just kind of working with what I've got there. And that works. So since this is not ever going to come off as much as what maybe the side rails will, then I'm not too worried about that. So that is kind of what we're looking at as far as a profile here. That is definitely a massive space difference than what I'm used to on this for sure. And those are very solid. We got that secure. So we're going to go ahead and flip this on its side, run the wires, and then bolt this back on, and then we can start working on feeding the wires through, and then work on splicing them after we get it temporarily mounted back onto the bike. Make sure all the connections are working, and then just go from there. We've got those lines run through. So now I'll go ahead and flip this on its side. Get that. Okay, so we've got these running out here. So now what we're simply just going to do is run these up and then along the side. Okay, so we go right here. I'll turn this down a little bit. Okay, so we go right here. We got our 2 wires coming out here, and then we'll just kind of feed them down along the back here. These should not come into contact with the tire at all or anything like that. I would have liked to have been able to find some clamps similar to what they do have, you know, already installed in here like that, but can't really find anything that doesn't require drilling extra holes. So I'm just going to feed these on up through here and have it come out up here. We've still got that much line left, especially for the right turn signal there. So we'll have enough to be able to cut and splice with our original OEM turn signals, and once we get that done, we'll hook it up and we'll test to see if the signals work, and then we'll just go from there. So okay, so I've got all 3 of the wires run through the opening here. Shine some light in here. Got all 3 of the wires running through the opening here, and probably need to wrap that up a little bit more, so just to make sure that it doesn't get pinched in between there. Though I don't think that it'll be that big of a deal, because there is some space in between here and the part on the bracket itself. But what I ended up doing, I originally was going to go with zip ties and do it all along here, but I lost some length in my cord which I didn't want to have to do. And then also I wanted something that would give me a little bit of a cleaner line going up the back of the inside of the fender. So we're looking at this. I mean, you can see everything is out of the way. This is, you know, well below any kind of brush range here. This is about where the center of the tire sits. So I don't think that any of this is going to be in the way or anything like that. I essentially used the command light clips to kind of organize these wires in here, but I used a little bit of heavier duty 3M double-sided tape to give it a little bit more strength and adherence. And I mean, it's stuck in there pretty well, so I'm not too concerned about that going anywhere. If I do need to replace these later on in the future, then that'll be an easier fix than like gluing something in there. Or, you know, I really didn't want to drill anything or anything like that. But also just kind of seeing the way that the zip ties held the wires in place didn't really give me a lot of confidence, though I have seen where people have done that. So, you know, to each his own that way. But we've got the wires running through, we've got them running through here. So the only thing to do now, I'm going to mount the fender back onto the bike temporarily. I'm not going to install everything else just yet, because once I get it on there, then I can go ahead and start cutting the wires and then determining how long I need to make those to extend it to the wire harness. Now, one thing that I will say as a tip, because the brake light wire is original OEM, so it actually is the exact length that would normally go from this opening that we ran all the other wires through all the way to the wire harness. And so you can actually use this as kind of a measurement to be able to determine how much extra wire you're going to need. Now, I am using the original lights that came on the bike because I you know, replaced I'm using factory OEM ones, new ones that I got to install on the back that don't have any scratches from saddlebags or anything like that on it. So I'll be using the wiring from my previously installed lights to extend out the right and the left turn signals. Both of these are color coded. I think this is like a blue and a green, and I think this may be like an orange and a green for the hot wire and then the ground wire, and the same thing for that with their corresponding connectors. So I'll be using the connectors from the other wire, so I've only got one cut, one joint, and everything that way. Not only that, but I would not have to do any kind of guesswork or anything like that using already existing OEM wire to just extend it out. So I know that a lot of people, whenever they do this, they may go with an aftermarket light, and that's perfectly fine, you know. But once again, I'm kind of doing this the easiest way possible for anybody that is just getting into making these kind of electrical modifications on their bike, and are not that familiar with like wire gauges, connecting wires, splicing wires, anything like that, or, you know, sealing them, heat shrinking them, anything that way. So, you know, if you got more experience and you want to go and get your own wire at any kind of hardware store or anything like that, then by all means, go ahead and do that. You know, I have no problem with that. But just to keep it simple and to keep it basic, and so that I know there's not going to be any question with the voltage coming through the wire or anything like that for what it's rated for, then I'm sticking with the OEM wiring. So I'm going to get this on the bike. We're not going to install all the bags and all the other stuff yet, the saddle or anything, because we're going to cut this. We're going to make sure that it works, that the signals work, you know, right and left the way that they're supposed to. And then that's whenever we'll close everything up and get it ready for its next modification. Okay, so we've got the fender on. We've got it bolted in tightly on this side, loosely on the other. Mainly just focusing on this area here. So I've actually got, if you got a cargo rack, go ahead and put that on as well. Now, I don't know if you can actually see down between there. Not too much of a reflection or anything. If you can see down through there, there is a section in it, a cutout that's definitely wide enough. Didn't have to do any modification to that. This is an OEM cargo rack bracket as well, so it's already it's fine the way that it is. I've got the grab rails on here, and all three of those wires I went ahead and just fed through there so they'd have more room to be able to maneuver around and be kind of repositioned as need be. Now, the brake line I've got going, or not the brake line, the brake light wire going down through here and back up through here as it does normally. So we'll have a good connection here. There's no problem there. Now, what I was saying before of using this as a method to be able to measure how much additional wiring is going to be necessary for this. So if this is where our blue wire currently comes out, and that is where it is with the brake line or brake light wire, we want it to be maybe an inch or so, a little bit longer. You're gonna have enough cable regardless, because I mean you've got all of this extra right here. So I'm just gonna make it a little bit longer just so that it doesn't have to stretch as much. So with that being the case right there, and that's pretty good, then I'll end up splicing about right here to be able to well, splicing, I should say splicing about here on the main wire and about here, and a little further back on the secondary one that's going to be the extension. So I'll go ahead and mark this with the masking tape as to where I'm going to do this, because I'm going to have to cut into this sleeve, and then also yeah, because that's gonna be plenty to be able to feed down through there and work off of that. So I'm not plugging anything in right now because I did not disconnect the battery. Okay, if you're new to this and you haven't done a lot of electrical work, or even as far as switching out like a headlight or a light bulb or anything like that, make sure to disconnect your battery before doing any kind of electrical work or anything like that, or at least make sure the wire is disconnected from any of the main wire harnessing, because you don't want to get shocked, you don't want to blow a fuse, or worse. So there's a little disclaimer warning for you right there. I will say I'm not a professional, but I have watched a lot of YouTube videos. So just exercise common sense. So since I'm actually just cutting these wires, then I've already got these disconnected. In a lot of cases, if you're going to try to splice and connect wires without unplugging anything from the main harness, then you definitely need to disconnect the battery terminals, or disconnect the power source to the wire harness from the battery first, so that you don't get shock or mess anything up that way. So let's go ahead and get into this. Okay, so here we go. We've got a green and a blue, and those do look like they are wire strands instead of just one single wire. So that's good. Now, to correspond with that, I've got a blue connector that hopefully, I don't know if that's gonna make it or not. Might end up having to use a thicker one than that, because that is just barely going over that. So I'm gonna set that aside, and then I'm gonna mainly be focusing on this. So I'm going to very carefully cut down this sheath. Be careful not to cut any wires along the way or damage the coating on the outside itself. Kind of cutting around. That's good. There. So we've got that. Now I do have white connectors. That's the other thing too. I've actually got a pack of heat shrink tubing that I got on Amazon. I'm going to be doing both the green and the blue separately, and then I'm going to heat shrink those together and do that. So I'm going to clip this, or actually I could probably just unwrap the tape on this to be able to have a little bit more of the heat, or the tubing exposed. Yeah, that's good. So I'm going from there to there, and that'll be the amount of wire that we've got connected to be able to run down through there, and that should work pretty well. Just going to cut down some of this tubing here. So for demonstration purposes, before we actually do this on our main primary wires so that we don't mess those up, what we've got to do is we've got to expose enough wire to be able to twist these together to connect them and make sure that it's a good connection. Now, typically the method with electronics for a very, secure, it's not going anywhere, type of wire connection or joint would be, you could either use the butt connectors that would be putting a wire in on each side and then crimping it down. That can kind of be a little bit, it may require a little bit of experience, because if you crimp too much, then it can actually break the wires and then you've lost your connection. They also have waterproof heat shrinking butt connectors that are pretty much the same thing. There's a metal piece inside of it that whenever you combine the two wires together, one on top of the other, and you crimp it, then you just heat shrink it so where that it's waterproof on either end, and then you've got your connection that way. And you just need to make sure that whenever you pull it, that it's not going to pull free. The other method that we're actually going to use is stripping the wires down enough to where we can actually join them and twist them together and then do the heat shrink tubing. Now, the primary steps in doing this is to remove the sleeve without cutting any of the wires on the inside. This is not a solid wire core inside of here. These are like 5 or 6 strands inside each one of these. So I would highly advise using a wire stripper. And this also helps if you don't really know the gauge of the wire itself. So you can just put it into here, and I'll demonstrate with this. You just pop it into there, you pull, and it strips the protective coating from the wire itself. You do the same thing with the other side. Now, of course, we're not going to be joining these together on our actual wire job with the bike itself. But what we do need to do, and I don't know, these are so tiny if you're actually able to see this or not. What we're going to do is spread these apart, kind of fan them out, and we've got about 6 wires here. So what we're going to do is we're going to kind of intermingle these together. Okay, and then we're going to twist one side, and we're going to twist the other side, and then we're going to wrap one. So we're wrapping the green around the blue side, and then we're going to go the opposite direction and wrap the blue around the green side. Now, what I should have done, and what I will do first, whenever I actually wire the actual lights that we're working with, would be to slide the shrink wrap, the heat shrink over the wire first, so that whenever that connection is made, then I can just slide it over and then use the heat gun and heat it up that way. Heat gun is the safest. If you've got a blow dryer, it may work. Some of these have certain temperatures that they conform to. The smaller ones will be affected more so than larger ones. So whenever we actually do combine these wires, we're going to have both of them that are the blue and green connected separately. And then we're going to run a larger black one over the entire section to seal that off. Now, I'm going to do this one first because this is kind of thin here. But then I'm also going to go and cover it as well with the covering that we used for our brake light assembly. Yeah. So, because that's a little bit more of a tighter wire, I think. Yeah, because that's 3 wire, so that would have been thicker anyway. So this should be good with this, and then we can plug it in. We can turn the bike on and test it without plugging any of the other things in, and make sure that we're getting a signal from our rear turn signal there. So we'll go ahead and do that and start clipping this and joining these together, and then we'll plug it in and make sure that it works before we consider that finished. So let's start stripping wires. Okay, so now that we've got that, let's just plug this in for a moment and check it out. All right, we've got a good connection, cancellation. And that's good. So we'll just unclip this. There we go. And then we will heat shrink these, and then I'll just kind of color the outer coating here so I know which is which. Or I guess it really doesn't matter because it's going to be covered over the black one anyway. So we'll go ahead and get these both taken care of, and then we'll move on to the left turn signal, and then we will start to clean this all up, and then we should be wrapped. Okay, so this is the left one here. We've already got it cut based on our measurements of the previous ones. I went ahead and sealed this with a waterproof heat shrink wrap. You could probably still use a little bit more heat on that for it to shrink some more. I wasn't able to turn on my heat gun all the way because it kept on flipping a switch, so I'll probably go back over that a little bit more whenever I can get it in a different outlet. So okay, so I've got my right or left turn signal cut and already partially spliced. So now I'll just do the same thing for this. I've already measured it out to the blue one so that I can be sure to have the same length. If you know, it doesn't have to be exact, but it definitely will be longer than what it was previously. So before we do the final thing on this, let's click this in, check it to make sure that it's a good connection. And we'll just go ahead and do the blue too while we're at it. Turn it on. Okay, we got left, we got right. Good. And cancel. Awesome. So now we can go ahead and finish off the connector on this. that way. And this heat shrink right here is actually waterproof, so it kind of does have like a little glue type of material on the inside. I'll just test it once more to make sure. Yes, I know, I'm aware I'm probably over testing this. Okay, and we're good. So that is turn signal relocation and wire extension on a 2018 Honda Shadow Aero with custom bracket, although you can still use the universal one. You're just going to have to do some modification to it for it to actually work with the OEM lights and mounts that way. So any comments, questions you have, or suggestions, please feel free to leave those in the comments. And if you like this video, if you feel that it helped you out in any way for a current project or a future project that you're looking to tackle, then let me know. And like, share it with your other riding buddies, and subscribe. Until next time, ride safe.